Hey, game makers, it's game dev. And more specifically, let's make a platformer. If you've spent any amount of time trolling through the history of my YouTube channel, uh, you may have noticed a trend where I am constantly trying to make some version of Secret of Mana, Second Densetsu 3 slash Trials of Mana. And so that's kind of become a specialty of mine is working in top-down uh, type games. Uh, and I wanted to use my top-down movement and collision system because I'm really proud of it. But I kind of feel like challenging myself a little bit, pushing myself outside of my comfort zone with this. And I thought a platformer would be fun. Uh, so that's what we're going to go with. Do I know what type of platformer I'm going for? Is it a Sonic or Mario or uh, Castlevania? That's the thing about platformers that's challenging. Like people ask me sometimes, like, why haven't you made like a platform movement and collision system? And uh, the answer is that there's no way to make a universal platform engine. I mean, no realistic way. I know there are those out there, but the big problem is, I create top-down movement and collision system and I've sold hundreds, and uh, very, very rarely get feature requests. Right? It just works for the type of game it is, whether you're making a JRPG, a Zelda-like, Stardew Valley-like. It just all of those behave the same way that you would expect for the most part. Move up, down, left, right, move diagonally, slide along walls, scoot around corners, all of the basic things that you would expect. But you get into the platform world, and every platformer is different. Mario Brothers is not Sonic. Sonic is not Castlevania. Castlevania is not Shovel Knight or Hollow Knight or any of the other knights. Uh, and so you pick one of those. Like you say, okay, I'm going to build a platformer engine, and I'm going to model it after Mario Brothers because I mean Mario Brothers, right? And so you make things work like sliding down slopes, like in Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario World, and running up slopes like Mario World, and all sorts of random stuff like that. And then somebody comes in and says, "How would I make this be like Sonic?" And I'd say, "You ride a different engine." Uh, and I don't want to answer those questions. So uh, that's why I've never released a platformer engine because each one is totally different. So I'm fairly certain I don't want to make a Sonic like. In fact, I'd say if anything, this is going to be closer to Hollow Knight. So we gotta ask ourselves a few questions to begin with. Do we want to do object-based collision or tile-based collision? Uh, I, I spoke about this a little bit, or wrote about this a little bit in my article on the Yo-Yo Tech blog about converting or using precise tile-based collisions. Uh, But the major differences are, yeah, there's some performance differences. Everybody's going to say there's performance differences. But unless your rooms are absolutely gigantic with hundreds and hundreds of wall objects, uh, then performance probably isn't the biggest concern, right? If you're making like a Terraria style game with like where like you have hundreds of individual little blocks that you want to be collidable, yeah, you're probably going to want to go tile collision. I don't think I'm going to make a gigantic world. It's definitely not going to be like a Terraria like. It's going to be more, I don't want to say, Metroidvania maybe. Uh, so my rooms are not going to be gigantic. So object based is plausible. Uh, but tile based is really nice because it's more fun to draw. Like playing with objects in the room and like having to switch between like tile object or ramp objects and square objects and putting a square object down and like stretching it all the way across compared to just like the line and drawing tools uh, that tile based systems allow in the room editor. It's just easier to use to draw and design levels with tiles. So that's my reasoning. I'm going to go with tile collision for world collision. That does not mean I'm not going to be doing any sort of object collision. Uh, the other question is ramps, like inclines in these type of games. That's what really complicates them. How your character interacts with slopes is huge to how your game feels. Sonic gains speed while running down a slope. Mario can slide down slopes. Uh, Castlevania has slopes, but they're just like stairs usually. Although like Symphony of the Night and some of the more Metroidvania style games have just slopes for uh, gliding around. Mega Man X has slopes, but regular Mega Man doesn't. If I remember correctly, Hollow Knight doesn't have slopes. Uh, so slopes can dramatically complicate the logic in your movement and collision system. So I tend to say if you don't need slopes, like, and I mean need slopes, uh, don't. Uh, you can always add them later, right? That's the beauty of game development and game design is you don't have to make these decisions now. I don't even have like a design document for this project. I just barely decided I'm going to be a platformer. So you let game design be organic and you just answer the questions you have to answer right now. Do I need slopes right now? No, I don't even know what my game's going to be. So we're not going to do slopes. Uh, will I add them later? Probably. Will there be a big thumbnail on video 15 or whatever that says, "Hey, we're finally adding slopes"? If I do it, yeah, then it's going to be called out because it'll be a big deal. But that's okay. It's okay to make big changes like that in the future. So so let's get in and start doing basic movement and tile collision. So for that, we're going to need a player. And for that player, we're going to need a sprite. So right now we're just going to do the old green rectangle moving around thing, right? Uh, so, right, player collision. It's going to be our basic collision mask. I'm going to make it 32 by 64. Oh. Sworn I checked that. There we go. Middle center is fine for now. I sometimes do bottom center, but it's not important right now. If we have a reason to change that later, we will. Don't go with big bright green. Do a little nice green like that. All right. Now we've got our object player. That is sprite right now. And then might as well change this right now to collision. Always recommend having a separate collision mask for your object. You have different sprites that you switch between for your player, like standing, running, jumping, attacking. Allowing the different sprites to control their own player mask is a good way to get stuck in a wall. So I really recommend a consistent mask and only swap this mask out under extreme control. Like you really are checking, like if I change to this mask, I'm not going to be stuck in a wall, or I'm going to change back before it matters. I got a video on my channel about collision checking that talks about when you would want to change your mask. But more often than not, especially with like a platforming character, we're going to leave it at this thing unless we absolutely need to change it for like crawling or sliding under obstacles, things like that. So, get some basic movement and collision going. So, we're going to go into our step event and we're going to say, let's get basic controls, which we are absolutely going to be changing these in the near future. But for now, we're just going to do the standard horizontal input. So hori equals keyboard check a right minus keyboard check vk left. That's going to get us a number -1 for moving left, +1 for moving right. And Let's do x plus equals hori. It's just about as dumb as it gets, right? For room test. Pop object player in here. Play. So I recommend, and this usually isn't like a problem that has to be addressed. Wow, it's moving great. It's slow. But run your game as often as possible. Like the more so that's kind of silly advice. The longer I've been coding without running my game, the more nervous I get. Uh, I have done extreme stretches, like multiple hours without pushing play, and that is like sweat dripping down my forehead, nervous. The sooner you can get to something that runs, no matter how dumb the code is, the better, because then you can start adding things, pushing play, and getting into that nice cycle of make change, push play, see if it worked, move on. Uh, so yeah, this code's super dumb, but we're running, and that's all that really matters right now. Now we can iterate on this. So before we start iterating, though, let's get some world collision going. I'm going to create a new sprite. Bottom there, sprite collision tiles. Those are going to be our collision tiles. It doesn't. I don't really know what size, like resolution, and like how big my character is going to be. I haven't necessarily locked anything in by saying my player is 32 by 64. I may end up going like 8-bit, 16 by 16 characters with 8 by 8 tiles. I can make those changes later when I start to really wonder about aesthetic and size and resolution stuff. So for right now, I'm just going to leave my tiles at 64 by 64, which means they're going to be 2. So I'm going to grab my red here. Square that is maybe 32 by 32. What is that, like right there? That's probably too big. That's right there. That's what we... Okay, so I do wish there was like... It's kind of funny that this isn't like 16 by 16 or 32 by 32. It's like 15 by 15. Some silly number. You would think that they'd want to a little bit more obvious. So, all right, so we're going to go over here to 32 square. Pretty sure that's what we want. Square. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we got a nice checkerboard pattern. We don't really need these other squares right now, but I'm going to leave them there. I'm going to leave the top one blank. You always leave the first one blank, because that's your no tile here tile index. Create a new set. So we could talk about naming convention now. I prefer 2 to 3 prefix for the asset type. So RM or OBJ or SPR, no underscores for assets. Tiles, I might just do a 4 for that. Tile set, or TS isn't bad either. Tile's nice. Tile collision. Point is, it doesn't matter. Just be consistent. Pick a naming convention, stick to it. Change it if you must, but change it across your project if you change it. I'll probably bring this in later. I usually keep a little note that I have Task Manager down here, so you can. I don't, and it's always set to always on top, so I don't accidentally do something that's technically behind the camera. So behind the scenes there. So let's click up here, create. There's a note asset type, and it's just a little text document. You can put whatever you want in there. I usually have a note that is my naming convention, just to remind myself and any other developers I end up bringing in to help with this, that there's a standard, and that standard needs to be followed. So I don't need that right now. I'm just gonna kind of build my own naming convention because of what I always do. and go from there. But naming conventions, they're important. Keep to them, and it'll be fine. All right, let's import tiles. Okay, tile width, we're gonna make 32 by 32. And there we go. Now we can start drawing some world collision in our room test. So let's add a tile, call it collisions, or just collisions, collision. We will assign our tile set to that. Now we can start drawing walls. Okay. So first thing we're going to want is some sort of physics being applied to us. Gravity. Gravity will be nice. I don't use the built-in variables for motion. You can, like h speed, v speed. You need to understand how they work, how they interact with each other, how modifying your h speed can modify both the speed variable and the direction variable. They all interact with each other, and they directly affect your x and y variables, but not in a position you really have control over. It happens after the step event and before the end step event, I believe. So it's kind of in this black hole where you don't have access to it. And I don't like that. I like to have full control over how my x and my y values are updated and what I do after they're updated, before they're updated, all that sort of stuff. So I don't use the built-in motion variables, and that's why you see very few tutorials that do use them besides the very beginner tutorials. So we're going to need a grab variable. I don't know what that's going to be yet, so we'll just say 0.2. Should be a low number typically. And this is going to be the first thing that we're doing to change our collision. So x, and then we're going to just say y equals, oh, right. So we're going to need our own horizontal and vertical speed to keep track of this sort of stuff. So I'm going to say v speed equals 0. H speed equals 0. Definitely going to need those. And then y plus equals v speed. And then v speed plus equals grav. And so now we should have gravity applied. Again, run it. We know what's going to happen, or we hope we know, but we might not. Oh, there he goes. Bye. So we need him to collide with things. So that means we need some sort of tile check, right? We need to see if we're colliding with anything. This is something I've already solved, and I'm not going to rewrite it just because it already exists. Don't reinvent the wheel. It works. So we're just going to use it. File meeting. Bring that over here to general helpers. So this is set up to do my, come on, give me my coloring. This is set up to use a collision test object. So this is all set for precise tile collisions. If you want it, there's a tutorial on the Yo-Yo Tech blog about how this is set up and how to use this. So not really necessary to step through all of this. I wish the coloring would update. Come on. There we go. All right, so we got our colors, and it's looking for an object collision test. So we're going to do object collision test, and let's see. Really want this. I wish I was just doing normal tile collision instead of the precise stuff, but there's a good chance I'm going to want it's precise in the future, and it's already here, so I might as well do it. So let's create another sprite. And this one, so I often have a lot of utility sprites in my project, things that are just used for a whole bunch of different things, kind of like Sprite Pixel there. So I like to name my sprites based on what they are and not how I'm using them in this case. So this is going to be sprite square. Let's make it 32 by 32. And say middle center with the American spelling. And besides this, my utility sprites are typically just white, so I can use image blend to change them to whatever color I want. And there we go. I may change that origin, we'll see. Then our collision tester. No, sorry. Tester, going to use this. And I might modify this function a little bit. Oh, change this to, there we are, object collision test. And then it's looking for tile map get tile. If tile's that, tile with tile map, x equals tile. So we're not going to change our image index just yet. We're only going to be looking at our main image index, which is 0, which has the square collision. So that's going to do a place meeting on our check object, return true. So it doesn't really matter how this works. It works. We're going to use it until it doesn't work, and then we'll be back in here to look at it more closely. So we're going to say if place meeting or tile meeting, move this up, aren't we? So this is going to start to look very familiar until we change it. If tile meeting x, y plus v speed and our layer. So another thing I like to do. So right now, if we go to room test, I've got this thing, collision, right? So what tile meeting is expecting is a layer. So it's expecting this. But I had to go like copy paste it from the room to make sure I spelled it the exact same way. Like, because if you do that, if you do lowercase c, it's not going to find it. It's case sensitive. So I don't like relying on string comparisons where I have to remember how something was spelled. So we're going to do this. I'm going to create a new script. I'm going to call this script macros. I'm going to all caps that because this is a big deal. So we don't need anything in here. We don't need to define a function. We don't need to do anything else. We can just define our macros. So I'm going to define a macro, call it, so my naming convention for my own personal macros is all caps underscore word separated. So this is going to be a layer collision. And I'm going to paste that right there. Save that, move back, and then I can do this and say layer. Hey, there it is, layer collision. So we can say if we're about to hit it, we do the while not tile meeting x, y plus sine speed, layer collision. Or, there we are. Then y plus equals sine v speed. Okay, and then we know we hit it, so v speed equals 0, and v speed, and we'll put gravity at the top. So this is kind of a, you always kind of want to know if your character is on ground. Like I see that all the time. I'm going to say on ground equals false. And instead of having a separate collision check to see if we're on the ground before we do anything like allow our character to jump, well, we know that as by the time we finish this block of code, we know whether we're on the ground or not. So I can just go like this. I can say on ground equals false. And if we hit the ground here, then ground equals true. There. Now we don't need a separate collision check. We've already done it. Did this work? That's a good question. It did. Fun. Can I still move? I can. And as you can see, our little collision tester is following us around. Awesome. So just, let's see where our tester became invisible. There we go. So now we need horizontal collisions. We could run left and right. Nothing would stop us from going through. Go back to object player and do this similar thing for player. In fact, we're just going to copy and paste it because that's never, ever hurt us. We're going to get a, let's see, h speed equals hori times 5. So we're gonna move at 5. This will definitely get more complicated. There's going to be a pretty major focus on I think movement in this game, like world traversal, jumping, managing your horizontal momentum, your vertical speeds, all that. It's going to be important. So this is going to be dead simple to start, and we'll complicate it as we need to. So for now, we just want to be able to move and collide with our world to get playing our game as soon as possible. So 4 times 5 h speed. So if tile meeting x plus h speed, then x plus sine h speed, x plus sine h speed equals 0. This one's kind of handy as well. Against wall. So now we've got it on ground, against wall. Probably complicate this a little bit more in the future, but there we go. Let's find that in our create event. And see if that works. Okay, so we see our first problem. We were able to go in further than we wanted to. So I think that may be due to our origin on this. I think this might, because we're testing tiles, we want to check the top left corner. So I'm going to change this to be top left. And let's run that again. There we go. There we go. Now we've got basic world collision. We're not jumping or anything yet, but it's a good start. So, and that's a good place for me to commit what I've got. Basic movement and collision, emphasis on basic. We're say this so many times. We're going to complicate it later, and that's okay that we're going to rewrite this completely many times over as our game gets more and more complicated and the design itself solidifies more. Start making decisions, saying, you know what, I don't want ramps. I never want ramps, and I'm sticking to that. So we'll be able to simplify things, or I absolutely need ramps. We're going to complicate things, and they're going to stay complicated. So eventually we'll make those decisions. Don't have to make them. So very basic. Push that up. Project is safe. Not sure what we're going to do next time. It'll be exciting though. No promises.